Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's special back to school webinar. My name is Aaron Klein, and I'll be your trainer for today. And I'll also be available for questions throughout the session. The goal of today's session is really just to highlight some of the new data and features in PolicyMap and hopefully get you more familiar with our new interface. This is a GoToWebinar format, and what that means is that everybody will be muted throughout the session. However, if you do have any questions, you can either raise your hand in the control panel, so that way I can unmute you if you have a mic, and you should see a little hand symbol in the tab at the top left for that. Or you can simply just type in your question and it'll show up on just my screen, and I'll do my best to answer it for you. Following this session, you're going to receive a follow-up email from GoToWebinar, and that email is going to contain all the links that I mentioned in today's session. I do believe it's going to contain a recording as well. But more importantly, it's going to contain my contact information. So if there's anything that I don't cover in today's session that you'd like to learn about, or if you'd like to learn about something in a bit more detail, you can just reach out to me directly. So before I start diving into the tool, I just want to give you all a little bit of background on PolicyMap. So we're part of a larger parent organization called Reinvestment Fund, which is a community development financial institution, or CDFI. And if you're not familiar with CDFIs, they're essentially community banks with a specific mission. So in the case of Reinvestment Fund, they generate growth and opportunity in low and moderate income communities through some unique programs such as affordable housing, charter schools, community health centers, and even grocery stores. So the goal is to really revitalize communities, and PolicyMap is really the genesis of that idea. So we needed a tool to do the analysis we wanted and to look at data spatially to learn a lot about certain communities. And I think what makes PolicyMap such a powerful tool is that it really allows you to easily visualize the data across different geographies and interact with the data in very unique ways. It's also quite easy to use, which I think you'll come to see throughout today's session. You don't need any background knowledge in something like GIS. Basically, if you can use Google Maps, you can use PolicyMap. All right, so this is the main interface of PolicyMap, and it is a web-based tool. So you can pan around and zoom in and out. At the top here, you'll see the location search bar, and this is where you can search for things like address, city, county, state, and zip, as well as some other geographies using this drop-down menu. So we can zoom in to somewhere like New York State. And really, once you get to a specific area, the next step is to just start adding data onto the map. So all of the data in PolicyMap can be found at the top of the screen here under these categories that you see. And each one of these categories is really unique, and we tried to organize the data in the most logical way possible. So starting with the first category, which is demographics, in here, you're gonna find a lot of basic things that you're probably already pretty familiar with. So things like population, age, and sex. I should mention that we have over 150 different sources within the tool. The majority of the data sets in the demographics category are from the census. And I do believe that most of the sources within PolicyMap, I think about 75%, are from public sources. However, we do also have some very unique data sets in here as well. So if we look under race ethnicity, we can view something like predominant race. And this allows us to view all the races together at one time. So instead of viewing one race at a time, this kind of combines them all into a single map. So what this is showing us is the purple areas are predominantly white population, whereas some of these other colors, if you look in the legend, represent other races. So right now we're viewing this data at the county level. We're pretty zoomed out, but if we zoom in closer to New York City, the map will redraw, and now we're viewing this data down to the census tract level. So at this zoom level, we can start to see areas that have different predominant races. So in the green, we have predominantly Black population. The orange is Hispanic. And then if we even zoom in further, so now we're down to the block group level. Now we can even see like Asian populations. And what's interesting about this data set is you'll see that certain areas, such as this one, are predominantly white. However, white is not, it does not make up the majority. We can also view something like maybe language spoken at home, or even predominant language. So if we do all languages, what you'll see is that a lot of it, of course, is English and Spanish. But if we exclude English and Spanish, what you'll see is that we get a very colorful map. And now it's showing us the third most common language in that area. So this allows us to identify certain pockets or certain areas or neighborhoods within our community where a certain language is spoken. So here we have French, Italian, Hindi, Chinese. If we move over to incomes and spending, we have different types of income, which you might already be familiar with. So you can view per capita income. However, we also have median family income and median household income. And someone asked about data sources. So yes, any data that you put onto the map, we're able to upload and combine that data with your data sets. So yeah, any data that you put onto the map. So if we look at something like median household income, you can always view the source in the legend here on the left side of the screen. So if we click on where it says census, that will take you to our data dictionary. And this is where you're going to find more detailed information about each source and how the data was processed. So this is going to tell you everything from the different years that are available for this source. Last time it was updated by our data team. We have a link to the raw data. And then if you scroll down, you're going to find very detailed descriptions for every source. And then as for uploading your own data, so we do have a data loader within the tool, which allows you to upload address level data or point data. So if you have a list of addresses, you can easily upload that to the tool, and then you can display those addresses as points on the map alongside any of our other data sets. If you have data that's been aggregated to a geography, like maybe a zip code or a county or a census tract, unfortunately, the data loader does not work with that type of data at this time. Under incomes and spending, we can also view poverty. And what you'll notice is that for some of these data sets, it really breaks it out and gets very specific. So for poverty, we can actually view it by race. We can view poverty by age, even by something like veteran status. So there really is just a ton of data within the tool. And I always recommend users to just take the time to do a little bit of data exploration and just go through each of these categories to see what we have to offer. So if you put something like families in poverty on the map, we can now identify areas where there's a higher percentage of people in deep poverty versus a lower percentage. You'll also find consumer spending habits in here, which can be really neat to look at. So you can see how much households are spending on things like housing, food, alcohol, and education. And you'll also find things like food insecurity in here as well. So this data set, the smallest geography that it's available at is the county level. And this data is from Feeding America. Other data sets, like you saw before, such as our census data, that's more granular. So those data sets are available all the way down to the census tract level and sometimes down to the block group level as well. If we take a look at quality of life, so this is one of our more unique categories because it contains a lot of different indicators that we think affect someone's quality of life. Under quality of life locations, we can view where things like grocery retail locations are. So this is a point data set. So now we can view basic information about each one of these points. We also have things like brownfields and superfunds in here and FEMA disaster declarations. And then one of our newest data sets is nonprofit locations. Moving down to computer and internet access. This allows us to see which areas have a higher percentage of households with computer access or without. And we also have broadband availability in here as well, which is a very unique data set because this data is available all the way down to the block level. So that's even smaller than the block group. So if we look at something like fiber optic access, we can now view specific blocks where fiber optic access is available or not available. Under transportation, a really neat data set to look at is the National Walkability Index from the EPA. And this shows you, so the darker areas are more walkable, whereas the lighter colored areas are less walkable. So obviously, in a big city like New York, pretty much all of this is walkable. But if we zoom out and start to look at some of the surrounding areas, like in upstate New York, for example, you'll see that some of these areas are much less walkable. Under environment and disaster risk, we have the social vulnerability index. If you're not familiar with that, basically it shows you which areas are more at risk when it comes to climate change and natural disasters. And then finally, under quality of life, if we take a look under food access and local foods, we can view things like low access tracts. So these are areas where there's less access to things like grocery stores. And if you click on the eye icon in the legend here, it does pull up a description of that data set. So this shows that basically low access tracts have at least 500 people or 33% of the population living more than half a mile in urban areas from the nearest supermarket. And another thing I should mention is that you can add both point data and layer data to the map at the same time. So if I just put low access tracts back on the map, and then I add, let's do grocery retail locations, we can now see that certain low access tracts have almost no grocery retail locations in them. And you can also filter the point data sets. So if we filter this by service level, so in this case, the orange colored grocery retail locations are full service, whereas the blue ones are more like Family Dollars or delis. Now we can see that certain low access tracts, such as this one, do not have any full service grocery retail locations. And then the last category I'll highlight is our health category. So under health facility locations, we can view where hospitals are, or even things like drug and alcohol treatment facilities. You can also view specific health conditions. So if we select something like diabetes, for example, we can now identify areas where there's a higher percentage of people with diabetes versus a lower percentage. Other data sets that we have in here, we have obesity, we have health insurance data. So we can view something like uninsured population, and so on and so forth. So that's really a quick overview of the data that's available within the tool. If you are looking for something specific and you're having trouble finding it under these categories, you can always use this data search bar at the top. And this allows you to type in a keyword or even a couple keywords. And then it's going to pull up all the different data sets that relate to those keywords. And once you add data to the map, there are really a variety of different ways to interact with and customize that data. So let's try a different city here. We'll zoom on into Philadelphia. And we'll take a look at median household income. So once you add a layer to the map, you'll see that the legend will appear on the left side of the screen here. And the legend, I would say, is the most powerful way to customize data within the tool. At the top, it shows you the title. So we're looking at the estimated median income of a household between 2017 and 2021. You can change the year for the data set. So we can actually go back in time for this data set and view the data from year 2000. We're also able to change the variable, and that's basically just how the data is being shown on the map. So maybe instead of median dollars, we want to view this data as percent change. And now we can identify areas where there's been an increase over time in median household income versus a decrease. Down at the bottom here, you can actually change the aggregation level. So in other words, this is showing you the geography that's being shown on the map, as well as the vintage here. So right now we're viewing the data at the census tract level. If we zoom in or out, it's going to adjust the shade by based on our zoom level. So now we're viewing it at the block group level. If we zoom out further, it will switch to the next largest shade by that's available, which are zip codes. Under colors, you can customize kind of the look of your map. So we can change the color. We can also invert the colors. So now the darker colored areas represent the low income tracts. One of our newest features is the ability to create your own custom color range. So we can actually go in here and change any of these colors within the range. And then finally, if you click on ranges, so what you'll see is that the default range is always going to be in quintiles. You can also adjust this to something as little as 2 ranges all the way up to 8 ranges. And then what's really unique about the ranges tab is that you can actually go into each one of these cut points that you see and adjust it to whatever you want. So if we wanted to focus on areas where median household income is very low and very high, we can go into each one of these cut points and adjust them so that we're able to visualize that on the map. So now instead of having what seems like random cut points or random ranges, you really got something that's much easier to understand once you adjust the cut points. And then finally, using the legend, we can isolate the ranges. So we can view just the lowest income census tracts, or maybe just the ones with a median household income of at least 120,000. And then we do also make it very easy to export any maps that you create. So let's say you wanted to pull a static image of this map and put it into a project you're working on or a report. That's really what this print icon is for at the bottom right. So once you click on that, it'll open up our print modal. And the print modal is fully interactive. So you can pan around and zoom within here, just like the main map. And the reason for that is because exactly what you see in this print modal is what will be exported. It's also very customizable, so you can edit the title, you can drag around the legends, and then you can also play around with the text size, the layout, and the formatting. And then once you're ready, you can click export and it'll download a copy of that map within your browser. So that's really how to share a static image of your map. If you wanted to share the map itself and kind of allow someone to open it up and interact with the data, that's what this share icon is for. The only thing with the share features are that the link and email features are not quite available yet. But once those are ready, and I do believe they should be ready sometime in the near future, you'll be able to simply send a link to someone that allows them to access your map or email your map to someone. And then down at the bottom right, you can also save your map. And I do recommend, if you are accessing Policy Map from a university site, definitely create an account because that will allow you to more easily access any of your saved work. And once you save that map, you can view it in your View Saved Work folder. Someone asked, what are some of the most used aspects of Policy Map that you have seen by researchers or institutions? So one of the most used features, which I will get to shortly, is the multi-layer maps feature. Before I get into that, I do want to cover how to download data within the tool. Someone asked, will the recording be made available? Yes, we will definitely share the recording of this session. And then someone asked, would they be able to view and interact with the map if they don't have an account? Yes, they would be able to, as long as, so some of the data within the tool is only available at certain levels. But yeah, you will be able to share a map with anyone, and just depending on the data that you are sharing, that will determine whether or not they have access to view that data. All right. So a lot of students and researchers are interested in pulling data from Policy Map, and we do make it really easy to do that within the tool. So there are two different ways to download data in Policy Map. The first of those is using our download modal, which you can find at the top right here. And this is a very straightforward feature. There are just 3 easy steps. And I would say that this is probably the best place to go if you're just looking to come into the tool and pull data without really interacting with it on a map. And there are 3 simple steps. So step 1, you can select the data. And you can do that by searching for something. So if we search for uninsured population, we can select that. And now we have the option to download that data. Once you select a layer, you can also change the year that you want to download for. So maybe instead of 2017 to 2021, we want to download this data from back between 2012 and 2016. And we can also change the variable. So maybe instead of the % of people who are uninsured, we wanted to download the total number of people. We can just select number, and now it's downloading the estimated number of people without health insurance. You can also download point data. So if I click add and search for hospitals, now I'm able to download data on hospitals. And then down at the bottom here, we do have this third type of download, which is the points with layer download. And basically what this does is it combines these 2 data sets together and creates almost really its own unique data set. So in this case, if we were to download just the layer data, what this would give us is a list of every single, in this case, census tract, because that is the geography or the aggregation level that we've selected in step 2. And we can also change this as well. So we could change this to zip code. So this would give us a list of every single zip code in the city of Philadelphia, and the percentage of people without health insurance in each of those zip codes. If we were to download the point data, it would give you a list of every single hospital in the city of Philadelphia. And that download would also contain all the other data that's associated with each point. And then finally, if we were to download a points with layer download, in this case, you would get a list of every single hospital in the city of Philadelphia, the zip code that each one sits in, and then finally, the percentage of people who are uninsured in each of those zip codes. We can also change the location in step 2. So if we wanted to download this data for the entire state of Pennsylvania, I can just search for that. And now we're downloading for the entire state. So I will show you what the layer download looks like, as well as the point download. And for the point download, I'm just going to do this for a smaller geography. Since if you download for a bigger geography, it can take a minute or two to complete the download. And then the last thing I should mention is under confirm download, you can either, so there are 2 different formats. The only difference is that the machine readable will remove the metadata at the top of each column. So if you're looking to pull it into a different program, like maybe Tableau, for example, this a lot of the times will make it easier to do that import. And then delivery method, you can either have the file emailed to you, or if you select download via browser, it's going to download within your browser. And once it's ready, it's going to appear at the top right here. And do keep in mind that if you want to do an email download, you do need to create a PolicyMap account. All right, so that is the first way to download. The second way is using the sidebar. And the way that the sidebar works is you can start by adding a boundary to the map. So if I add the boundary of Pennsylvania, you're going to get this little bubble menu at the top, which will give you the option to download. Once you select download, the sidebar will appear on the right side of the screen here. And the sidebar is unique because it's directly tied to both the map and the legends. So any data that you put onto the map is what you'll be able to download. So if I add something like, let's do diabetes. Now, if we look in the sidebar, we're able to download that layer data. Same thing goes for point data. So if I go in here and add hospitals, now I have the option to download just the point data here, as well as the points with layer data. And as I mentioned before, the sidebar is directly tied to the legend. And what that means is that if I change things in the legend, such as the year, in this case, there's only 1 year available. But if I switch this to something like poverty, and I go in here and change the year. Now, if we look in the sidebar, it reflects that change. So now we're downloading for year 2000. Same thing goes for the variable. So if instead of percent, we want number, we can just select number. And now the sidebar shows we're downloading the number of people in poverty. And then the shade by or the aggregation level, that can be adjusted either in the legend here or in the sidebar as well. And then one last thing is that you can actually select individual ranges here. And if we do that, it's only going to download the data for those, or I should say the geographies that are within those specific ranges. All right, so let me just show you what those two downloads look like from earlier. So this one, I believe, should be our points download. So what we have here is a list of every single hospital in the city of Philadelphia. And as I mentioned before, it's going to include not only the basic info, but all this other data that's associated with each point. So things like total beds, number of physicians, and so on and so forth. And then as for the layer data, what this download's giving us is a list of every single county in the state of Pennsylvania. So in column B, we have all the counties. In columns D and E, we have the FIPS code for each county. So that's really just the code that the census gives for each county. And then in column F, you have the percentage of people without health insurance in each of those counties. So yeah, that is how to download data in PolicyMap. The last feature that I'm going to cover in today's session is our multi-layer maps feature, which allows you to do a little bit of spatial analytics. So the default interface of PolicyMap is always going to be the single layer view. However, below that, you will see this option to switch to multi-layer maps. So let's say we wanted to see how something like poverty intersects with something like uninsured population. If we were to put poverty on the map, and let's look at this let's do the census tract level. And then if we were to try to put uninsured population on the map, what you'll see is that the layer switches and we can't see how those two things intersect. However, once we switch to multi-layer maps, what you'll see is that instead of having different colors that represent different ranges and different levels of concentration on the map, everything is just one color. And then it's your job to use the legend here to identify the criteria that you want to see on the map. So let's say we just want to identify the census tracts where at least, let's try 20% of the population is uninsured. It's a bit high, so let's do 10%. Now it's only going to show us the census tracts in purple, where at least 10% of the population is uninsured. And you can kind of think of this left number here as being greater than and this right number as being less than. And we can continue this process with up to 5 different layers. So now I'm able to add poverty. Once I do that, the map still looks the same as it did before, because right now it's capturing all the data for this newly added data set. However, we're still being confined within the at least 10% of people without health insurance criteria that we set earlier. But once we adjust this to, say, 20%, now you'll notice that more geographies start to fall off the map. So now it's only showing us the census tracts in purple that meet both of our criteria. So if we click on this one, for example, we can see that it meets the criteria for at least 20% of the population in poverty and at least 10% of the population without health insurance. So that's why it's shaded in. If we click on a geography that's not shaded in, such as this one, for example, we can see that it meets the criteria for poverty, but it does not meet the criteria for uninsured population. So for that reason, it's not shaded in. And we can even take this a step further and add maybe households without a vehicle. And I'll try 20% for this one as well. Let's try even 50% and see what happens. So now we're really only left with a handful of different geographies. So that's really the gist of the multi-layer maps. It's more of a site selection tool that allows you to zoom down to a specific location, identify very specific criteria using the legend, and then see which specific geographies meet the criteria that you've set. One last thing with the multi-layer maps is that if you look at the top of the legend here, what you'll see is that right now we're currently using the AND function, which is showing us the intersection of data. However, we do also have this OR function, which will show us the overlapping of data. So once we switch over to that, what we get sometimes is kind of a scary looking map, but it's also really interesting to look at because it allows us to still identify the areas that meet 3 of our criteria, like this one, but now we can also visualize the areas that meet maybe 2 of our criteria or just 1. So the OR function gives us a really cool map and allows us to kind of better understand some of these surrounding neighborhoods. All right, let me know if anybody else has any questions. Otherwise, those were really all the features that I was hoping to cover in today's session. One last thing I'll show you is our support page, which provides tutorials for all of our features. So everything from how to download data, how to upload data, which I wasn't able to get to, as well as multi-layer maps. And you can also access those tutorials at the bottom left here by clicking on this new little robot who we named Pam, which is the opposite, or is map spelled backwards. But yeah, you do get all these tutorials in here as well. All right, if nobody else has any questions, I just want to thank you all for joining the session. I do see that there are a couple of questions that are a bit more complicated, so I will reach out to you after the session. But if any of you think of questions later on, just feel free to reach out to me directly. All right, thanks again for joining and have a great upcoming semester.